All right, today we're going to look at something in a totally new light. We're talking about trauma recovery, but not just as healing. Think of it more like construction. Yeah, like building something piece by piece. We're going to dive into this really powerful idea, the architecture of recovery.
So let's just ask the big question right up front. How do you rebuild after something incredibly challenging happens in your life? I mean, really rebuild. What's so interesting about the material we're looking at today is that it completely reframes that. It suggests it's not about fixing what's broken. No, it's about building something entirely new, right from the foundation up.
And just like with any big construction job, you can't just show up and start throwing up walls, right? That'd be chaos. You need a plan, you need a blueprint. And that's exactly where we start with this idea of recovery, laying that all important blueprint.
Okay, so before we go any further, let's get on the same page. What are we even talking about when we say trauma recovery? Well, our source breaks it down as a gradual process. And listen to these words: creating, understanding, developing. See, those aren't passive words, they're action words. It tells you right away that this is an active, step-by-step journey. You're the builder here.
So, where does a journey like this even begin? It starts with one simple but incredibly powerful thing: acknowledgement. Seriously, think about it like you're surveying the land before you even think about building. You have to take an honest look at what's there, at the impact, because that assessment is the very ground everything else is going to be built on.
But acknowledgement can sound a little vague, right? So let's break it down into what you actually do. It's not just sitting there. It's the active work of allowing yourself to actually process your emotions. It's about fighting that urge to just avoid it all. And maybe the most important part, it's about practicing self-compassion, not beating yourself up with self-judgment. That's a huge one.
Okay, so you've got your blueprint. You surveyed the land. Now it's time for, arguably, the most critical part of any build: pouring the foundation. And in this whole architectural model of recovery, what's that foundation? It's one word: safety. Yep, there it is. A sense of safety is the absolute bedrock. I mean, think about it. You would never, ever try to build a house on shaky, unstable ground, right? The walls would just crumble. It's the exact same idea here. Without that feeling of safety, both inside yourself and in your environment, any progress you make, well, it's always at risk of just collapsing. And this right here just lays out so clearly why that bedrock is everything. Look at the difference. Without safety, you're living in a state of constant alert, just always on edge, bracing for the next thing. But then, on the other side, once safety is established, you can finally breathe. There's space to process, space to think, and space to actually begin healing. But okay, a foundation is just that, the beginning. No architect, no matter how brilliant, builds a skyscraper by themselves, right? They have a crew, a team. And guess what? The same goes for recovery. And this is such a powerful idea. You don't build this alone. In fact, you shouldn't have to. So often we're told we have to be tough, handle things on our own, this idea of rugged individualism. But the material we're looking at today just throws that idea out the window. It argues the complete opposite. That real, genuine connection isn't just nice, it's a fundamental structural part of the whole reconstruction process.
I love how plainly the source puts this. Support plays a crucial role. It's not an optional extra, not just a nice to have. It's the scaffolding. Think about that. It's the temporary structure on the outside that holds everything steady while you're doing the really hard work on the inside. It's what keeps things from collapsing and what fights back against that feeling of isolation that can be so overwhelming.
So, who makes up this construction crew? Well, our source points to two main groups. First, you've got your trusted people, friends, family. They're like your hands-on crew, right there with you day to day. And then you have the trained professionals, your counselors, your therapists. Think of them as the engineers and architects. They've got the specialized blueprints and the expert tools to help guide the whole project.
And speaking of tools, you can't build anything without a good toolkit. Now, obviously in recovery, we're not talking about hammers and nails. We're talking about really practical mental and emotional skills, the kind of stuff that helps you manage the day-to-day work of putting things back together. And here is the absolute game changer, the most crucial point. These are learnable skills. Let that sink in. That is so empowering. It means you're not helpless. You don't have to just sit there and wait for the tough moments to wash over you. You can actually, actively learn to use tools to help you navigate them.
So let's look at 3 essential tools you might find in this kit. First up is grounding. This is all about pulling yourself back to the here and now when your mind is just spinning. Simple stuff like really feeling your feet on the floor. Then there's relaxation. These are actual techniques you can use to tell your body's alarm system, that fight or flight response, to just stand down. And third, emotional regulation. This is a big one. It's the skill of noticing a really intense feeling, but not letting it hijack everything and take over the driver's seat. Each one of these is just a vital piece of equipment. Okay, let's recap. The foundation is poured and it's solid. Your crew is on site, ready to help. Your toolkit is stocked. Now we get to the really hopeful part. This is where you start building the actual structure. This is where you start reclaiming your life.
And this is a really important shift in focus. A lot of the early work is about just getting stable, managing the distress. But the end goal, the ultimate goal, isn't just to survive, it's to thrive. It's about moving into a place where you're actively, consciously building a life that feels good, that feels meaningful to you again. And here are the blueprints for what that reclaimed life actually looks like. Building resilience? That's like reinforcing the whole structure so it can handle any future storms that come along. Restoring a sense of control? That's you stepping back into your role as the architect, taking charge of the plans. And re-engaging in things that matter to you? That's like furnishing the rooms and bringing life into the house. All of it works together to create real well-being, to make that house feel like a home again.
So look, if there's just one idea you take away from all of this, please let it be this one. Recovery is not about patching up a few cracks in an old wall. It's not just repair work. It's a full-scale reconstruction. You're creating something new. And very often, that new structure is actually stronger and wiser and built with more intention than whatever stood there before. So I'll just leave you with this question to think about. When you look at your own architecture of self, what's one small thing you could do? What's just one line you could draw on your own blueprint starting today to help build a more resilient future for yourself? Something to think about. Thanks so much for